In the beginning, computing was chaotic free-for-all. You had proprietary systems everywhere, each speaking on its own secret language. Then, in 1991, a 21-year-old Finnish student named Linus said, "What if I made my own operating system kernel? And what if I give it away for free?" Boom! Linux was born. It was scrappy, open source, and destined to change the world. But wait, it wasn't entirely self-made. Enter GNU, created by Richard Stallman in the 1980s, a movement dedicated to building a free and open source operating system. Stallman had already developed the GNU compiler and core utilities like ls and grep. These were essential building blocks for any functional operating systems. But GNU was missing one crucial thing, a working kernel.
1992, we had almost the entire GNU system, but one essential important component was missing. That component is the kernel, which is the program that's the platform on which the other programs run. It allocates the computer's resources to other programs. So in 1992, Mr. Torvalds, who had written a proprietary kernel called Linux, liberated it.
When Linus dropped the Linux kernel into the mix, everything clicked. It was a peanut butter to the GNU's jelly, and the two combined to create what we now know as full-fledged operating system. Technically, it's called GNU Linux, but most people just call it Linux because, well, branding. This naming debate still rages on in tech circles, but one thing is clear. Without GNU, Linux would have been a lonely kernel with no tools to back it up. So shout out to the Stallman and the GNU project for giving Linux the boost it needed to go mainstream. Linux isn't an operating system, it's a kernel, the heart of the system that talks to your hardware. Developers stood at kernel and built entire ecosystems around it, spawning distros like Ubuntu, Fedora, and for the true masochists, Arch Linux. With Linux, the choice is yours. Too many choices, in fact. And it's not just about which distro you pick, it's about how they package software and where they get it from. Generally, there are three big families that dominate the scene. You got the Debian base, like Ubuntu, Linux Mint, and 100 more. They feature the DEB package system and the beloved APT. Then we got the Arch base, which is like the minimalist do-it-yourself approach. You got Arch Linux, Manjaro, and others using Pacman as their package manager. It's all about cutting-edge updates and reading a lot of wiki pages. And then finally, you got the Red Hat Enterprise Linux. You got CentOS, Fedora, Rocky Linux, Alma Linux. They all use RPM packages and DNF or YUM package. These distros power massive enterprises and come with that sleek professional vibe. Each family has its own quirks. Debian-based distros are known for its stability and user-friendliness. Arch-based is for customizability and bleeding-edge software. And Red Hat-based is for its enterprise-grade reliability. Pick your poison. Linux is an open source, which means anyone can contribute, from your neighbor who scripts in Python to massive corporations like Google. It's the tech equivalent of a potluck dinner, except no one brought any bugs. Well, not intentionally. Without open source, we wouldn't have Android, Docker, or even half the web. And it all started with Linux. Open source fueled a wave of innovation. Anyone could peek under the hood, fix the bugs, or add a new feature. This collaborative ethos birthed entire ecosystem. Think GNOME, KDE, Systemd, and hundreds of other projects. Governments, educational institutions, and giant multinationals all jump on board to shape the future of computing. Fact. Over 96% of the world's top server run Linux. Why? Because it's fast, secure, and you can configure it to do exactly what you need. From Amazon Web Services to Google Cloud, if you have used the internet today, you have used Linux. Whether you're binging Netflix, scrolling through social media, or searching on Google, behind those services is a Linux-based infrastructure. Companies love Linux because it's endlessly adaptable, costs less, and usually plays well with containerization and virtualization technologies like Docker and Kubernetes. Both of which, by the way, are also heavily reliant on Linux. Despite dominating servers, Linux desktop never hit the mainstream. Why? One word: usability. But with modern distros like Ubuntu and Mint, it's finally almost kind of user-friendly. Well, sometimes. Desktop Linux can be a dream for power users. Want to reskin your UI, patch your kernel, or remove every line of telemetry code? Sure, go for it. But for a typical user, the learning curve has historically been steep. Hardware compatibility, printer drivers, and gaming support, these have improved immensely over the years, but mainstream adoption still lags. Nonetheless, each year the lines blur a bit more, and that dreaded phrase, "but does it run on Linux?" become less of a showstopper. Linux and gaming historically like oil and water, but things are changing. Valve's Steam Decks run Linux, and thanks to tools like Proton, even Windows-only games are playable. Linux is saying, I can game too. Linux gaming is still niche, but it's getting there, slowly. Proton, Wine, Lutris, these tools let you run games originally built for Windows, bridging a once massive gap. And with the Steam Deck's success, game developers are paying more attention to the Linux compatibility. While it's nowhere near Windows library size, the momentum is undeniable. The future could see Linux as a legitimate contender for hardcore gamers, especially as native support grows. Here's the twist: you might already be a Linux user. Android? Yeah, it's Linux based. Yep, the thing in your pocket runs a heavily modified Linux kernel. Google took Linux and said, let's turn it into an ecosystem for the masses. With Android, Linux doesn't just dominate servers, it dominates the planet. Android is a prime example of open source Linux at a massive scale. It trades a typical Linux userland for specialized Android components, but at its core, it's still a form of Linux. This means billions of devices worldwide are unknowingly part of the Linux family. That includes TV, set-top boxes, car infotainment systems, systems, and even some smartwatches. When we say Linux is everywhere, we literally mean everywhere. Linux isn't just for geeks. Enterprises love it. Why? No licensing fees, extreme customizability, and it scales like a dream. From Wall Street to Hollywood, Linux powers businesses big and small. Fun fact, even Microsoft, the original Linux nemesis, now loves Linux. Microsoft Azure? Yeah, it runs Linux. Major cloud providers from AWS to Azure to Google Cloud lean heavily on Linux for everything from hosting to AI workloads. If you look under the hood of big data analytics, machine learning frameworks, or HPC clusters, odds are they're running some variant of Linux. Very often one of the Red Hat-based clones. And with Microsoft embracing the Linux kernel in its Windows subsystem for Linux, the once bitter rivalry is quickly turning into synergy. The future's Linux. IoT devices? Check. AI supercomputers? Check. Space mission? Double check. I mean, look at this video.
Dr. Chan, recalculate the new thruster data and relay it to Blue Oyster Cult immediately in Sunset.
Okay, roger that, Doctor. Fuck!
What's wrong?
Seriously, auto-updating now? General, I won't be able to calculate the right data for the satellite for 49 minutes.
How long till impact?
11 minutes and 44 seconds.
Fuck Microsoft!
From a student science project to a global powerhouse, Linux isn't just an operating system. It's a movement. It's here to stay. Going forward, Linux is poised to dominate the cutting-edge realms of technology. AI researchers want flexible, open environment, which Linux does best. Wherever tech is going, Linux will be there. And open source communities expand and more industry adopts containerized virtualized solutions, Linux remain at the forefront of the next revolution in tech.